All right. So I'm trying to get this figured out, why it's not. There we go. Okay. So today is the fourth session, and we're going to be talking about, some volunteer resources that are available for you as staff for when working with your volunteers. I purposefully on this session don't do the like how do you go through the how do you go through the application and all of those pieces. I can do that at another time if new staff need help with that. But this one I want to share with everybody some I think are probably some of the best resources for volunteer management. So we're going to start by just talking about volunteers in general. And I was actually really excited this morning. I had gotten a report. The Western Regional Volunteer Specialist had shared a report about a month ago, and I had glanced at it but really didn't look at it. So when I came in this morning, I pulled it off and really looked at it, and I'm excited because I'm going to share some new things about volunteers that I found this morning. But again, you know, kind of what we would label our traditional volunteers, and I know that word traditional, but those volunteers that, you know, what people think of when they think of a volunteer. You know, we know that volunteering has always been important to the country. And when most people think of a volunteer, they think of a middle-aged white female who's in a middle to high income, married with children, and does not work outside of the home. And we know that that is not the case anymore. That is not even close to what our volunteers look like. They are working, you know, most of our volunteers are working either part-time or full-time. They're male, female, or other. They're of all ages. They can be white or non-white. They could be married or single, any income level. They have very minimal free time. And what we also know about our volunteers in today's world is that they carefully evaluate those volunteer assignments before they commit to volunteering for an organization. One of the things I found, and I'm going to be sharing a document with you guys. It is Verified Volunteers is a company that does background checks for a lot of the states in extension use Verified Volunteers for their background checks. And every year they do a survey of the volunteers within their system, and they had 7,200 volunteers respond to the survey in 2018-19. And so what I found, and so that it can give you an idea, I think this gives us a good idea of what volunteers look like today. And I would say, you know, unfortunately, I was just thinking about it this morning. I was like, you know, we don't ask or we don't pull these numbers from on ES2 37 with volunteers. I believe we can probably pull these numbers off of 4-H Online, and it's something I think I'm going to do just to look to see how we compare to these numbers. But what they find is about 20% of volunteers are male, 79% are female, and then 1% identify as diverse or other with their gender identity. The age range, 6% of volunteers are under 18 years old, 18% are 18 to 34 years old, 30% are 35 to 54 years old, 26 are 55 to 64, and 20% are over 64 years old. And then where they volunteer and live, about 35% live in urban areas, 56% live in suburban areas, and then 9% live in rural areas. For those of you that are on, do you guys think that that's pretty a good representation of what you think ours look like, our volunteers? Or I'm thinking we're probably a little bit higher in male volunteers. But as I think about the ages, that seems pretty similar to what we are within 4-H, especially in our Nevada program. And then looking at where they live, volunteer and live, that one I would be very curious about. Yeah, I think we're higher in rural too, Sarah. I think we're a lot higher in rural, but it would be interesting to see those, to actually see that. So I'm going to try to see if I can pull it off of our system. So we also know that African Americans are volunteering in greater numbers than ever before. And what they find, though, is when looking at minority groups, they're asked to volunteer less. However, they tend to volunteer in higher rates than the average population. So what that means is looking at what is that, how do we reach them, and we need to ask them to volunteer. And then also, the majority of our volunteers are working, and they are seeing that single people show significantly, or are showing significant increases in volunteering. And I know, it's been a long time since I've been at the county level, I realize that, but when I was at the county, it was not unusual to have somebody, especially kind of in that 24 to 30 range, that maybe isn't married yet and wants something to do, and they were a 4-H member as a child, so they come back and volunteer. They also find that volunteers give more money to charity than non-volunteers, and 25% of all volunteers, which is about 25.2 million people, volunteer 5 or more hours per week. And I think that number's actually gone up. I actually have another statistic in here that talks about some of those, how many hours people volunteer. And they also find that religious people who attend religious services are more generous with their volunteer time. So this is where I found, so these are some of the new numbers with contribution. What they found is volunteers that work with multiple organizations tend to give more, both in time and money. So they found that nearly 1 in 5, or 18% of those involved in 4 or more volunteer organizations, give more than 5 hours each time that they volunteer. And about 49% of the volunteers give more than 5 hours each time they volunteer, say that they're much more willing to make a financial contribution to those organizations. They also found that 83% of the respondents, and again, there was about 7,200 people that responded to the survey, were at least willing to donate or make an in-kind donation to the organization that they volunteer with. So I think that those, a lot of times we always say that, we don't want to ask our volunteers for donations because, I'm thinking of financial donations because they give so much time. But if you look at some of these statistics, it shows that they are more willing to give a financial contribution. So why do people volunteer? Well, what they have found is people volunteer for a variety of reasons. They want to belong to something. They want to give back. They want to complete their education. I was just having a conversation with Cody last week about, volunteering. And I said, I think we need to start looking at some volunteer opportunities for him. He's still pretty young, but I said, when you get into high school, it's a real possibility you're going to have to volunteer to, get volunteer hours in order to graduate. A lot of schools are moving to that. And I know we have students here that are working for us, college students, that are required to give so many hours of service back into the community. We do have those volunteers that want recognition. And I think, and that can be in a variety of ways. As we talk about some of the resources, I'm going to talk about recognition, and I'll share with you some things. But You know, they want to be part of problem solving. They want to test out career possibilities. You know, I think we all get a lot of our former 4-Hers or even our current 4-Hers want to see if this might be something they're interested in. So they come and try and volunteer in the office to see. And the number one reason why people volunteer is because they were asked to volunteer. And that, you know, I think that that is probably our key piece. And then some insights about these came from this study from Verified Volunteers. They found that 83% contributed, they volunteered because they wanted to contribute to a cause that they cared about. 66% wanted to improve their community. 63% spent time doing something that they're interested in. 17% wanted to enhance their resume. 8% said it was mandatory for school or another organization, and 7% said it was for family-related reasons. And I like the 35% said that they volunteered to socialize. And I know, you know, coming from someone who's moved around quite a bit in my career and in my life, or you know, in my adult life, I guess. I can honestly say that's one of the reasons why I volunteer with some of the organizations. I know, you know, lately I've been volunteering with with Cody's programs, but it's because that's how I've met people, you know, through his sports organizations and through his, you know, and through school, etc. And I think that's a lot of people, that's how they make friends. And then in volunteer trends, so they did find that 84% of volunteers give at least a few hours a month, or at least volunteer a few times a year of these, you know, of the 7,200 respondents. But they found that more than a quarter of the respondents volunteered once a week or more frequently. My guess is those were the 4-H volunteers that are in their system. And then about 13% gave more than 5 hours per year. 34% gave 3 to 5 hours per year. 47% gave 2 to 3 hours per year, and then 6% gave 1 hour or less per year. What I see in this trend is, you know, looking at essentially, you know, we've got a bulk of our volunteers are willing to give anywhere from 2 to 5 hours per year. So we need to think within the 4-H program, what are some opportunities that we can give to people for that time frame. So that's one of the reasons why we're looking at you know, the short-term club model. You know, I don't know what we'll call it, the spark or the spin or whatever, you know, whatever we decide to call something like that. But you know, that we're asking them to give, you know, probably 6 or so hours. So yeah, most of the volunteers that we currently have are above that 5 hour a year mark. I would agree completely with that, Liz, but what we have to look at is what are some other opportunities for volunteers that we don't currently have, you know, so, and that's why we're looking at, you know, some of those other opportunities. So we know that extension volunteers are the lifeblood to our organization. You know, we could not do what we do without our volunteers. We cannot replace a volunteer, and I need to change the sentence to say we can't replace a volunteer position. Know that we can replace a person who is maybe filling that volunteer position, but we can't necessarily fill that volunteer position. And I'm okay replacing a person if it's not the right fit. So this study, and I was looking at this, and it's from 1986, and I need to find out, I just didn't have time to find out. I'm hoping that, you know, we eventually will get a volunteer specialist and they can actually find out this stuff. But I still think that this is very prevalent to today, but they found 1 in 80 Americans has served in some kind of volunteer capacity with cooperative extension. So that could be like master gardeners or 4-H or, you know, some of our, I know we do have, and I can't think of, master food preserver in some states. They have, you know, there's a whole variety. In Nevada, there's the group that, and I can't think of their names, but they go around and help teach, oh, I can't think of it. Anyway, but we do have volunteers that even go and help and teach. We know that volunteers invest about 51 days every year on, for every day that an extension professional invests in working with those volunteers. So for every day that you work with a volunteer, they're going to invest about 51 hours or 51 days. So that's quite a, you know, quite a significant chunk. And if you looked at, so the independent sector, which is an organization that they have put together, they've figured out what the value of volunteer time is. And I don't remember what Nevada's is right now. Actually, I just learned it, but nationally it's running about right around $21 an hour. So if we were to pay a volunteer for the work that they do for our organization, we would be paying them about it's roughly between $20 and $22 an hour. So if you look at that, that's about 5 times the entire cooperative extension budget on the federal level, not just the federal budget, but the state budgets and the county budgets, all of it combined for every state. So think about that. And then, you know, if communities were to pay for those services, they would pay about $4.5 billion annually for the services that are, that volunteers provide. So if you're looking at the philosophy and understanding the philosophy of volunteer development and then 4-H youth development, it is, you know, we know that 4-H relies and we thrive on the strong ethics of volunteerism. You know, that is very important to us. Quality youth development programming occurs in 4-H because we have strong partnerships with our dedicated and our caring volunteers. You know, we probably, you know, this organization has some of the most passionate and dedicated volunteers that I've seen. But you know, it's a comprehensive, we have a comprehensive volunteer system as well that includes both the management of volunteer resources and then also developing, you know, providing, not only having the management of volunteers, but also the volunteer development, which I think is important. We have active preparation, training, and involvement in of volunteers that enhance the credibility and integrity. The fact that, you know, shooting sports is a prime example. We require the 15 hours of extra training for our shooting sports volunteers around, you know, really focuses on risk management, safety, and how to work with kids, positive youth development. And that has, I mean, to me, we hold, you know, a premier program in that area. We also, you know, we have an express commitment to the involvement of youth and adults as partners. You know, we want to make sure that our youth are as much a part of decision making as our adult volunteers. And the recognition that volunteering is a two-way process. It's going to benefit both the volunteer and the 4-H program. And that's one of the reasons why, you know, it's so important to do professional development with our volunteers, to, you know, so that they can gain some skills that they may need. So if you look at organizations like Cooperative Extension, you know, which volunteer development, to me, volunteer development in Extension is really recognized as a profession. You know, I know we all complain about putting our volunteers into Workday, but when you really think about that, you know, that kind of elevates that level. I know it sounds funny, but, you know, it's a pain in the rear end, but it does elevate it a little bit in the fact that the university sees them, you know, as a you know, a non-paid employee, and that, you know, we all benefit from volunteer involvement. There is a lot, you know, there's quite a bit of research going on that looks at specific competencies and those capacities that are needed by volunteer program managers. And that's, you know, if you look at the PRKC, our Professional Research Knowledge and Competencies model, there is a strong section on volunteer management and development. I think, I can't remember exactly the term that they use. I should, but I don't. But that is, you know, that's a big key piece. One of the things too, and I know Liz mentioned the other day that she's going to go to every other year, Extension hosts an extension conference on volunteerism. And you can go, and it's not for volunteers, it's for those that work with volunteers. And it's not just 4-H. Actually, I also ran into Wendy, the Master Gardener person in in the northern area, and she mentioned the other day that she's going to be going to that conference as well. And so, you know, I think that shows our level of commitment to not only training our volunteers, but those that work with volunteers. And for those of you, you know, I don't know, Sarah, if you've ever had the opportunity to go to that. I'm hoping that we can put in, I know 2 years ago, or for the conference that's coming up in May, I had actually submitted a proposal to host that training here in Reno. Billings was selected, unfortunately, but that was okay. We were, you know, I think Billings is still pretty close. The next one in 2 years will probably go to the East Coast, but you know, we've already got the proposal put together. We might as well. To me, I want to keep submitting because I think it is such an important conference. And so if you ever have that opportunity to go to that, it's important. Okay. So also, oops, that one I didn't get completely done. The one thing that I also found was kind of interesting in this report from Verified Volunteers. It talked about volunteers in the digital age and what they prefer. And what they found is that 89% of the volunteers prefer a digital platform over pen and paper. As far as enrollment, finding information, etc. And I know we get complaints all the time from our volunteers about 4-H online, but you know, if you look at really what the statistics say, they also said volunteers that are over 35 and older are open to digital platforms, but they don't always prefer the mobile device. And so, because in this report it talks about the mobile devices, and I think it was oh, what is it? I can't remember what it said about mobile devices. Basically, it said that that's not a critical component of, you know, we need to have it mobile accessible, but it's not, you know, they'd actually prefer to get on a computer. What they say is volunteers find new opportunities online. They also find them through friends and by networking to volunteer. But the number one place that they find new places to volunteer is online. And this one I found really interesting. 3 out of 4 volunteers prefer an in-person training. But they did say that 37% prefer some type of combination of online, in-person, and training, you know, like using pamphlets and guides. So I personally think we're right on target with the way we have put together our volunteer trainings, where we've offered in-person, we've offered online, and, you know, and then we also have some paper and pencil trainings. And so that blended learning is really important. My hope, you know, I'm planning on this fall, not necessarily, you know, trying to go to some other sites. I know Sharon mentioned maybe going to Winnemucca, and that to me, you know, so maybe we're not just always in the same locations. Maybe we go to other locations as well. so not, they have that opportunity for the face-to-face too. So that's kind of about volunteers, but I want to give you some information about there's actually going to be 5 resources that I'm going to share with you. The first one I'm going to talk about is the ISOTURE model. And I don't know, some of you may have heard of the ISOTURE model. The other one is a national learning priorities. And I personally really like the national learning priorities. They're really designed for you as a staff person to learn more about volunteerism. And then the VRKC, I think almost all of you participated in at least one of the sessions, the volunteer training sessions that we held the last 3 weeks. And all 3 of the lessons that we taught during that session came out of the VRKC, which is our Volunteer Research Knowledge and Competency Model. And then then there's some really good resources on the national website. And I'm also going to briefly talk about the resources that we have on the regional level. So to talk about ISOTURE, so what that is identify, select, orientation, training, utilization, recognition, and evaluation. So if we look at the I in that, the identification, this is what is really, we have to identify, number 1, what the volunteer opportunities are going to be in your community, and number 2, who those potential volunteers could be. It's really important, and we talked about volunteers and kind of those trends in volunteers. Many of our volunteers look at, they want to see a job description. It was really interesting. I think it was the expo committees. I had put together just a brief, not an extensive job description for people that were on the committee, and also if they were interested in being a chair of one of those committees. And with that, I had probably 5 of our current volunteers ask me to see a copy of that job description or that position description. They really want to see that. That's something that is important to them. And so they want to know what those expectations are, how many hours it's going to take, those types of things. And so I think it's important. In the we do have sample job descriptions for a whole variety of volunteers that you could take at your county level, and you could use those or you could adapt them for your county. But they should include these types of things in there. So that's identifying, and then you're going to select your volunteers. You want to make sure that you're selecting the best qualified individuals for volunteer opportunities. You don't want to just take somebody because they're a warm body. I know sometimes camp, we get really desperate for adult volunteers, and we will take, a warm body because we need to have adult volunteers, and that is not going to be successful for anybody. We want to make sure that it is the right fit. I was actually really, as tough of a decision as it was last year for one of our groups to cancel their 4-H camp because they didn't have enough adults. They did have a couple of adults that had gone the year previous that had volunteered to come back, but they were not the right fit for camp, and they had some issues, so they just made the decision not to do that. But we have to, I think that's really important. There is a stiff competition for volunteers. Every organization is looking for volunteers now. I know my mom was just telling me yesterday that she had been talking to a friend of hers who asked her to serve on the board for Pet Haven, which is a cat rescue group in our community. And it was again, she would never have volunteered to do that on her own. She had to be asked to do it, And number two, you know, it was that, you know, that's one organization. So, you know, you need to ask. The thing is, and that's where sometimes I struggle, is I'm looking for, you know, I want to get volunteers or I want to get programs up and going, and I don't spend the time really thinking about what is it that they're going to be doing. What do we, you know, what are the expectations? And so anymore, I have, I do take that time to think about those, you know, think about that piece of it. And then we need to determine if a potential volunteer has the skills or interests needed to do the job. You know, when you get a application in for a volunteer, you need to look at that application and make sure that they do have the right skills for that. It is, you know, and we don't have to accept every application that comes in. You know, you can scrutinize those a little bit. We need, you know, you need to have, you can't, you know, you shouldn't make that decision all on your own. You should have those conversations, you know, like, you know, I think everybody here is in that northern rural area. And so you would probably want to have a discussion, you know, with Sarah, or when we get the volunteer specialist on board, with that volunteer specialist to talk about, you know, hey, just something in this application doesn't sit right with me. What do you think? And, you know, you can do that. So it's really important. That's where I need to change this. That's completely wrong now. You need to make sure that you follow the correct screening process that we have. You don't contact Stephanie or Paul anymore. I will, you know, I'll get that. Essentially right now, if you have questions about volunteer screening, you can ask myself, you can ask Sarah, you could ask, pretty much at this point, that's probably all we've got. We're almost done. We'll hopefully have the person hired in Clark County pretty soon. And Sharon answered, it took me 6 years to find another volunteer that would lead a sewing and quilting club. Yes. There's a big group of ladies that, yeah, exactly. It's just, and that's where, so this is where Sharon, you know, they didn't want to work with them on the regular basis. And so this is where we could look at maybe some of those short-term opportunities. You know, if there's a big group, maybe one of them wants to do 6 weeks or, you know, 4 weeks, and then maybe you do, you know, maybe another one wants to do another, you know, another area for, you know, a certain amount of time. So we can, you know, that's where we need to start thinking kind of outside of our box, and doing that, because it is, you know, even our older volunteers don't necessarily want to volunteer year round for programs. You know, they've got lots that they're doing. And I found that with sewing, you know, a lot of them want to do about 6 weeks of sewing and then they're done. They're kind of done with some of those frustrations. And then the other key, any questions to this point on that? Okay. The next piece that we need to do is orientation. And I think this is what is going to establish a successful volunteer in your county, is if you have a good orientation program. My goal is, and this has been a goal of mine in almost every position I've ever had in Extension, but I'm going to get it accomplished here at some point. But what I would like to do, I would love to set up a volunteer mentoring program, you know, where we can not only do orientation with volunteers, but maybe we have some key volunteers that don't necessarily want to work with youth anymore, you know, which it happens, you know, I mean, you get burned out, but they still want to volunteer with the organization. They could serve as a mentor to our new volunteers, or, you know, or maybe you still have club leaders that still want to mentor other club leaders. So that would be one thing. And then also making sure that we have a solid program statewide of these are the things that we need to do for orientation. It's important that our volunteers understand the organization as a whole, as well as the specific job. You know, so many times we forget that our volunteers may not, you know, and we're finding more and more of our volunteers are coming to our program. They may not be familiar with our program, especially when you're looking at some of the, like the robotics. You know, that's where I see we get a lot of volunteers for that, but they may not come in with a 4-H knowledge. And so having them understand the relationship of 4-H to the university and the relationship, you know, and even the one thing I always think is critical too, letting our volunteers know about the land-grant university. Some of them may not even have heard that term before. And so letting them know what the land-grant university is, and that our, you know, in our 3-way partnership, or actually technically I would say we almost have a 4-way partnership personally, you know, with our federal, with the state government, with our land-grant university, and then with the county. You know, and that really does establish that positive environment. It can be done a variety of ways. One can be a general session or a meeting. I know when I was in the county, when I was in Michigan, I used to hold quarterly orientation sessions. And so any new volunteer within that quarter would come to that orientation session, and we, you know, so there was usually not, I mean, it wasn't a big county anyway. We only had, I think, 16,000 people in the whole county. So it wasn't, you know, large, but we would have 2 or 3 volunteers there usually at every one of those sessions. And we would go over, you know, they would have already gotten their county handbook about, you know, here's 4-H, but they would then, you know, we would go over that handbook, and some of them were brand new, and some of them had been maybe doing the, you know, maybe trying for a couple of months, being a leader. So we would answer questions, and those were great. You know, some counties do once a year orientation for all new volunteers. You can set that up however you want it. It can also be a one-on-one. I know we have quite a few counties here in Nevada that do one-on-one orientation with new volunteers on a, you know, on a regular basis. And then it can also be a self-directed or take-home lessons. And that's our child protection, the child protection that we require within the 4-H program, not the university's child protection requirements, but is a state take-home study guide. So, you know, we kind of do the whole gamut. Then we have training, and this is not just, you know, orientation training, this is ongoing training. And I know I've had counties that have been asking me lately, you know, about doing local training, and in addition to our state trainings. And I think that that is really, really important, that we do not only, you know, and we're only doing 2 state trainings a year, one in the fall and one in the spring, but you know, I think it's important that we do, you know, that at the county level you do training for your volunteers as well. You know, it helps them develop those knowledge, attitudes, and skills that are going to make their jobs easier. One of the things I've seen is, you know, if you have regular leaders council meetings, sometimes I've seen counties be very, very successful with, you know, a half an hour before the leaders council meeting is volunteer training, or it could even be 15 minutes, you know, right before you start your leaders council meeting. That way, you know, your volunteers aren't having to come in multiple times, you know, they just come in for those. I've also seen where, you know, counties do an all-day Saturday training. You know, maybe 2 or 3 counties go together and do a you know, a Saturday training. That, you know, I have not seen that model in Nevada, but I've seen it in other states, and that's pretty successful, you know, where you, again, you know, it's 2 or 3 counties or maybe 5 counties come together and they do that all day Saturday. training. There should be pre-job training. So that's your orientation that you do before they start working with the youth. The on-the-job training, we know that they're going to be getting, on-the-job training all the time on pretty much everything. So, it's good, I think, for you as a staff to maybe check in with them and say, hey, has anything come up that you have questions about, with your clubs that you would consider on-the-job training. And then also continuing education. So those are opportunities, that we provide to them, both at the local and state level. And then also, at the regional and national level. Now there is no longer, the Western Regional Leaders Forum has been eliminated at this point, but the volunteer specialists are working on trying to create other training opportunities, other professional development opportunities for volunteers at the regional level. And I think that is, I think that's important. And I haven't advertised it too much, just because we've had so many other things going on, but the Southern region has always hosted a regional leaders forum at Rock Eagle Camp in Georgia. And they have now, I think this year is the first year it's official, they have opened it up to all, to across the country, to all volunteers. So, hopefully in the future we'll be advertising that one a little bit more. I don't know if we'll have, we may have volunteers that decide that they want to go to that. It would be a great opportunity, good opportunity for our staff to present at that as well. But again, we've just had so many other things that I hate to throw one more piece into the puzzle. And then utilization of our volunteers, making sure that our volunteers are put to work. That is the right person in the right job with the right preparation, that you are delegating, you're giving authority and guidance to them to do the job, that you're following up with them, regular trainings, updates, and then communication, making sure our communication is ongoing and that it's a two-way communication. I think that that's really important. There's nothing worse than having a volunteer get frustrated because maybe they've come in, and I'll tell you this, I've learned this from experience. In my first job as a program coordinator, I had a volunteer come into my office, and and this is what was the bad thing about it. I fully admit, I actually had grown up with this person, and she had moved to the community that I was living in at the time. She was a strong 4-H alum, had been a 4-H'er her entire life, very, very strong. She had graduated from college and moved to this community and decided she wanted to volunteer with 4-H. Well, she didn't have a club that she really knew that she wanted to get involved in. And I'll tell you, I did not get her immediately placed into a club. And we ended up, I think she did volunteer later on, but we did lose her for a time being because I did not utilize her right away. And so that is, and she didn't want to lead her own club. She really wanted to get involved in another club. I just didn't get that connection made. And so, it's really important that if you do have situations like that you do utilize them. Or if they have come to you and say, hey, is there something else I can help you with? Try to find something that they can help you with. I don't know if anybody has examples of where they've used volunteers in other ways in their program, besides just the clubs. I know probably Sharon and Sarah have definitely probably had those experiences. And I don't know, Josh and Liz, if you have had those, in the short time you've been here, but, those could, I think it's important that we, if they do have those interests, to try to utilize them in other ways. And then supervising volunteers is, making sure you understand what motivates volunteers. If we have volunteers that have a high social need, you don't put them in isolation. If we have volunteers that want to receive recognition, if they like public recognition, then we need to figure out a way that we can maybe receive, maybe share that, give that to them. Volunteers that want to be in front of a group of people, and I know that can be tough sometimes, but at awards night, instead of the staff always being the MC, maybe, if you have a volunteer that wants to be in front of a group and likes to be in front of a group, that's the other key, then, and is good at being in front of a group, then, have them be the MC for that. I think that that's important. And we know that volunteers can always leave. They can leave on their own accord, or they can leave on our accord. And then recognizing volunteers. So recognizing our volunteers, it's important that we recognize their contributions to the organization. I always felt like it was important if I had a volunteer that went above and beyond their role, I would always try to send a handwritten thank you note to that volunteer for that. It can also be a formal and tangible item, or it can be an informal and intangible item. One of the things that I used to always do during National Volunteer Week, which is, some of you, I think most everybody on here knows that that is happening this week, is I used to order, and I've been out of that realm for quite a number of years, but there was a group that I could order seed packets from that had some kind of saying about being a volunteer. Or you could order, something little that was very inexpensive. And then I would just send that with a little note to all of my volunteers saying thank you for what they had done over the year. I know it's not a big thing, but, it was at least showed them, that we did recognize. That's that kind of tangible item. This week I've been trying to highlight volunteers on our state Facebook page, asking you as the staff to send me those, because I don't know all of our volunteers. And so, I think, and it seems like they've been pretty well received on our page. We're getting lots of comments, lots of shares and those types of things. And that's not what I was going for. I think it's important that we do recognize those volunteers. It's something that I would like to do more regularly, not just this week or this month, but maybe, maybe we figure out a way that we can do it, monthly or something, to where we can continue to recognize our volunteers. Again, that kind of leads into that recognition should be ongoing. It shouldn't be once a year at the recognition dinner. It shouldn't be, during National Volunteer Month, etc. And because they have found that volunteers that are recognized for their contributions are more likely to stay with the organization. And so the other piece with recognition is not everybody needs a plaque. Not everybody needs to be formally recognized. Again, it could be a handwritten thank you note to volunteers. I know as a staff person, I love that. And, that handwritten thank you note, I don't need all the recognition, but that handwritten thank you note is, it always makes me feel good. And it makes me feel like somebody's actually paying attention. And so, I actually, on my desk, I have these are a big box of thank you notes. It's 40 thank you notes. And I have these for those times. I'm not as good as I should be, and I fully 100% admit that, but I bought the box of thank you notes, so it's always there. Normally it's not behind me, usually it's right in front of me, so I can remember to take that time. Because it does, and again, they're going to continue to come back. And then evaluation. We don't think of evaluation very often with volunteers, but I think it is important that we do some kind of evaluation process with our volunteers. It can be, it can be conducted for the individual's performance or the effectiveness of the total volunteer program. You know, you can look at each of your individual volunteers, or you can look at volunteer programming. One of the things that you will have in the box file that I will share with you is it's a volunteerism for the next generation document, and it's a set of criteria for evaluating a volunteer program. So it's a pretty long document. You wouldn't necessarily have to do the entire thing. It actually came out of Arkansas, but I think it is important that we, you know, that you could do that. Look at the health of your volunteer or volunteer component of the organization. But it's important that volunteers receive some feedback on the quality of their work. You know, if you see a volunteer that maybe is not relating with kids as well as you think that they should, you know, it could be having that conversation with them and say, you know, I noticed that, you know, you're just not quite reaching the kids the way, you know, you're just not quite relating to them. You know, what can I do to help you to understand youth a little bit better? Or maybe they're just very unorganized, or whatever it is, you know, you can have that. It should also be a two-way effort. You know, you should be helping evaluate the volunteers, but it's also, I think, important that our volunteers have that opportunity to share their opinions with the managers, paid staff, and program. I will tell you that volunteers should never be part of the formal evaluation process of our staff. They can have input to that, but they should never feel like they are the ones who write the evaluation for the staff. And so there's actually a really good, I've seen a really good survey that went out to county volunteers, looking at the program, looking at the staffing, and looking at opportunities, and then professional development for those volunteers. And it really did help that county make some changes to the way that they were handling volunteer management. You know, that's something that, you know, I'd be more than happy to share with a county if they want to do that. What it was just a survey that went out to the volunteers. And then and then the staff came back. It could go either to, you know, if the volunteers don't feel comfortable, I mean, it's anonymous, so you don't know who's actually answering the survey, but if they don't feel comfortable, you know, then you could also, I will share that. Yes, definitely, Sarah, I'll share it. You can, you know, you could have it come back to a central person rather than, you know, I know in this case, the volunteer specialist initiated it, and it was pilot tested in this county, and it was fantastic. Like, the results were really cool. Okay, and so yes, I will make sure that I share that. I'm going to make a note, because you guys know me, if I don't make a note, I will forget. I just can't find a piece of paper right now. Here we go. Share volunteer eval. Okay. Any questions on the ISOTURE model? Looking at time. Okay. We're still good on time. The next thing I want to share with you is this National 4-H Learning Priority. It is, this is a rubric that was put together. It's pretty, you know, it is kind of academic, but it was put together to help our 4-H professionals create and maintain an effective local volunteer system. It includes both the volunteer development and the volunteer management. So what I'm going to do is actually, I'm going to go through kind of the topics. So on this, it includes topics like developing and implementing an infrastructure to support a volunteer delivery system, your personal readiness, the organizational readiness, the engagement of volunteers, the education of volunteers. Oops, sorry. And then the sustainability of volunteer effort. So you can see the topics underneath that, and the review and analysis of volunteer delivery system. So it includes a rubric which has self-assessments, it has resources, learning activities, and reading activities. And they broke down those learning activities into novice, practitioner, and expert levels. So I'm going to stop sharing this, and I'm actually going to go to that document. Just have to find it. There we go. Okay. So now I'm going to share that document just so you guys can see. Okay, so this is what it looks like, and this is going to be in the piece that I have, you know, that I'll in the Nevada box that I have for you guys. I'm looking at this, and most of these people have retired or moved into different roles, so, but that's okay. It's still very, very much. In fact, I was just talking, I was talking with Doug Swanson about this, and you know, he's reviewed it multiple times as the national program leader for volunteer development, and feels like it's still very relevant. But so, okay, goes into background information. You know, the kind of this volunteer delivery system. It has some assumptions, but what I want to show you is really when you get into the main piece of it. Sorry. So this is one of the rubrics. So this is the developing and implementing an infrastructure for volunteer delivery system. So it gives an overview. It gives some good resources in this area. And then what it does is you identify really if you feel like you are at a novice, or if you are at a practitioner or an expert level. And it describes what those different levels mean. But it talks about, you know, the specific learning outcome is defining volunteerism and how volunteerism is critical to 4-H youth development programs. So this is a really good, these are good resources. These are reading resources essentially for that learning outcome. Now, the one that I'm still trying to, and hopefully in your offices, you're going to see it's a box kind of, you know, it looks like a book box, and it's called Taxi. There's different colors of taxis, but it tells you which one that you should go to. I'm hoping that you guys still have those in your offices. If you do, do not dispose of them, even though it may have like a 1990s date on it. They are still very, very good. And I know Sarah and I at one point were trying to, I think somebody had Taxi, but I know I've been trying to find a copy.
Carrie, I have two or three, and I'm willing to share one with you.
That would be awesome.
But these are incredibly valuable documents, and you know, the information, you know, I'm hoping that National 4-H will take the time to update Taxi, because this was a very valuable program.
Yes, very much so. And I have mentioned that, and I know it's been mentioned multiple times, because Taxi is one of those that, you know, it was created many, many years ago. One of the first things in my career, but still extremely. But you can see, yeah, so we may figure out a way to get some Taxi stuff, even if we have to make some copies ourselves. I may try to do that. But so you can see, you know, what this looks like. And again, you know, it's going to have these resources for you. Most of them are going to be reading resources. There isn't a lot of like training opportunities. Now the one, and I think it's still on the national website, is called Everyone Ready, and that is maintaining the Everyone Ready was a program. It was a 3-year program that they did online learning and they did self-learning. They combined the two. And it's been over for a while, but I believe the resources are still on the national, on 4h.org website. So they are, you know, again, really good. Sorry, I'm trying to make sure. Oh, good, Sharon. I'm glad to hear that you completed it. I was a bad person and did not complete it. I should have, but I didn't. But again, those resources are still available. Very, very good. And a lot of them are listed in here. So, you know, that's just one. I wanted to share this. If you had not seen it, this to me is a great piece. Okay, now I'm going to go back to sharing the PowerPoint. Okay. So then we move into the VRKC, the Volunteer Research Knowledge and Competencies. So there are taxonomy domains within this. If you're, you know, I've talked about the PRKC and we shared that in in the first orientation session that we had. Sorry, I'm trying to move my mouse over. And of course I'm losing my mouse. There we go. We are, you know, we talked about the PRKC where they have domains. The same thing is true with the VRKC. So those are communications, organization, program management, educational design and delivery, positive youth development, interpersonal characteristics. Okay, so there's, what is that? 2, 4, probably 8 of them. You can see in there with the VRKC, what I love about the VRKC, and we're working towards with the PRKC, but with the VRKC, each one of these topics underneath have a lesson plan for you to use as staff with volunteers, or some of them actually volunteers can use with youth. But that's what I loved. It includes the handouts, it includes the PowerPoint that you need, it includes you know, your lesson plan itself. Again, that's what we used last week, you know, the last 3 weeks during the volunteer trainings. You know, none of us, I mean, yes, we put our, I told them, you know, here's what I think we should use, but put our Nevada spin on them. And I think we all did that, but essentially, all of those lesson plans are there. So I mentioned, you know, maybe at your leaders council meetings or your, you know, whatever you call your overall council, I mentioned that you could do 15 minutes or 30-minute trainings. They're already there for you. You just pull them and go. You know, and so again, I really like them. You can see the, you know, here's the topics for these, program management, you know, the organization and structure of extension. Your lesson plan's already there. You don't have to create it. The club management is one that I used last week, you know, during the trainings. I think, you know, that's a good one. It also, you know, again, has all of these. I really like the ones on educational design and delivery. You know, those are always really good. And oh, and then the positive youth development. I know Sarah did the general positive youth development, but you can see it actually breaks it down even further. And then the interpersonal characteristics, these are great ones. I actually went to Elko, I think maybe my first year here, and did the honesty, ethics, and morality training for their club officers. So, you know, again, you can use some of these with youth as well as with the adults. So, and then with that, I will share. So there is, and these are located on 4h.org. I will also have these, I will also have the information in the Nevada box. You're going to get the overview of the PRKC. I'm just going to share it this way. You're going to get the overview of it. So again, it talks about each one of these area, what it is, and develop, how it was developed, who all was, who all were authors on it, etc. So that is one piece of it. And then, here is what, okay, here's an overview of just the VRKC, the lesson plan that would go along. So, it's got what you say in the beginning, it's got what you do, the activity, how you run the activities, how much time it's going to take, what you need to do ahead of time. And then, so you've got, and then it has your do, reflect, apply. It's got an evaluate, each one of them has an evaluation tool to it. They're all pretty much the same evaluation tool, but, and then here is, no, this is the other one. Okay. This would be the PowerPoint that goes, yeah, this is the PowerPoint with that original, or with that lesson plan. Do I like the look of these PowerPoints? No, I always change them because I just don't like this look. But, here is, the PowerPoint, so you've got it. It's already put together for you. And they're not in, I don't think they're in PDF format. This is saved as PDF for some reason. I needed to save it that way. So, yeah, so the VRKC is a great resource for you as volunteer, as volunteer managers. I highly recommend taking that. And again, those are at the 4h.org. Here, that looks like it's the wrong. Anyway, but it is on 4h.org. And if you go to professional development and volunteer management, you'll find it under there. Then we have the National Framework for Volunteerism. And I'm pulling it up. This was created, I don't even know what year now, but the target audience for this is really looking at, again, staff that administer volunteers. So it talks about creating safe environments, talks about engaging volunteers and administering volunteer management systems, the benefits of volunteering and the strengthening partnerships for volunteering. And so there is, so it talks about, I'm going to share this. Okay. So, okay. So it goes into information about each one of those strengthening partnerships. So how you can do that. And then critical relationships and considerations, how you could implement, looking at this is kind of the national direction for extension. So it is, it's just a document for you to share with you. And then the last thing that I want to share with you on, the last thing I want to share with you is is the information about the, sorry, I'm trying to, whoa, okay. Sorry, it's not liking me. The information about our online training modules that we have. And I'll share this. So these are located on, and this link is on our State 4-H website. So if you go to the State 4-H website to the volunteer tab and go to online training, it's going to link you right to this site. I'm hoping that this works. Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing. Sorry. Okay. And I'm going to go back to sharing. There we go. Okay, so when you go in, they are going to, I'm going to the home page. So they're going to log in, and I have included, there are directions on how you, how they log in to this system to be able to get access to the training course. Once they go in, then they're going to go to the modules. They'll see this, you know, see this page. They're going to go to the modules, and then you just, so what, I'll answer that in just 1 second, Sharon. So what happens is you launch module 1, and you can't go into module 2 until you've completed module 1. They have set it up that way.
Professionals, we look forward to working with you as we make the best better.
Yeah, so I finished this module. This was the end of the module. And then you hit finish. The one thing I learned, and I learned this, you know, you tell them if they have a question about it, the web page you're viewing is trying to close a tab. You do not want to close the tab. You just hit no. And then you finish that. And then you click next, and it takes you to the takes you to the next module. So you can see,
The feeling of safety,
you know, this is, but I have, you know, so embedded in these modules are quizzes. So you can see, let's see, you know, I'm just going through. They take about 10 minutes each to go through. So they really do not take a long time. So here's an example of one of the quizzes. Okay. I'm going to play this for just a sec.
Whenever someone does or says something that might make someone else feel unwelcome.
Okay, so then they have to click continue. And so here is an example of a quiz. So a safe and inclusive environment helps to ensure that the, you know, goals are, oh, that wasn't the right answer. So youth can learn and goals can be reached. So when they move them in there, if they're not correct, they can't move it in. That's one. So then you know, they get a correct answer.
All staff and volunteers are screened.
So
there are qualified lifeguards for all water activities, and
yeah.
you sign in as a 4-H volunteer.
So this is a,
there are lots of things you can do to create an environment that makes us feel safe and inclusive. You might invite others who represent diversity in our community and help us feel welcome. I was to activities that.
So just so everybody knows, that is Cody's voice, not his voice anymore, but that was his voice about 2 years ago. So just thought I'd share that. But again, and then they go, you know, and then they can go to the next module, the level 3, and then and then module 4. And I was going to, sorry, somebody just walked by my office. And then the end of the course, what happens here, and this is where I think this will answer your question, Sharon. So when they finish the course, they have to register their training. So what happens is they go to this website and they put in the information about completing the modules. So they're going to put in their email address. This is what I just discovered, was they put in their email addresses, and they and then they'll get an email from the system saying that they have completed the training. And I'm pretty sure that there's a way that I can go in and check that. I just have not looked at the directions hard enough to okay, so are they putting in, are they registering? That's what you need to double check, is make sure that did you register with your email address and everything at that end? Okay, because I will show you, I'm going to show you guys the email that I got this morning, because I actually just went through, you know, I've gone through them before, but I never had registered them. So I registered them this morning. And let's see, where is it at? I just have to find it. it comes from Google Forms is what it is what the message comes from. And I will share it. Oops. So it may be going to your to the other box. So they will get this email, saying that they completed, thanks for filling out the volunteer training. And then I've got to figure out how we can access that database, which I will do. I wasn't sure who all had completed them, but again, they could also forward you this email. Granted, they wouldn't have necessarily had to watch them to fill out that form, but I think they maybe had to. I'm not 100% sure, but we are, this right now is our kind of, we say it's kind of our stopgap for these modules. It's not what we would prefer for the system for the modules, but when I was looking at opportunities, I really did not want to put them into e-extension and have our volunteers have another login that they have to remember and another system to remember to go into. As far as I wanted it, because even if we put the link to e-extension, then they have to sign up for e-extension, and it's just not, I didn't feel like that was really a good option for us. And we really couldn't, it would be hard to link it. And 4-H Online, I would love to put them into 4-H Online, which we can do right now. But the problem with that is they had to be put into this Canva and then put into 4-H Online. Well, I know that it's not very long, and we will be charged for training in 4-H Online, like up to, they were talking anywhere from $2 to $5 a member that we would have to pay in addition for any trainings that we had in 4-H Online. And I know that we can't afford that. So this was our best option. We are looking at some other options right now of getting these a little bit more, a little easier to access. But this seems to be, and I know there's been some problems with volunteers that are trying to, they're having some issues. And I know the first time I ran through these, I did have an issue. I can't remember what it was, but this morning I was able to run through all 4 of them, and I did it so I could test it. I ran through all 4 of them with no problem. So if you have a volunteer and I ran them on Internet Explorer, which, if you have a volunteer that's having an issue, have them try another web browser, or, maybe they just come back and try it at another time. They don't have to do all 4 at one time. They can come back and do, if they want to do 1 at a time, if they have 10 minutes to do 1 at a time, then they can do them. So, but these are the topics for those. And we have said that volunteers, that they need to go through these, when they're new volunteer, they need to go through these. I highly recommend that all of our volunteers do these at least the first year. And then I think we did say that they needed to do them every, when they have to redo their fingerprints, we ask that they redo the child protection training, the self-study guide, and then also these modules. I think they're really important to look at multiple times. So, and if you haven't gone through and looked at it, gone through them, I suggest, you going through them. I can say that they're very good, but I'm also a little bit biased in the fact that I helped write them. So I helped prepare them. So I, don't want to say they're really good, because I don't want people, but I personally, think that they are good for people to use. So, and then the other that's the thing, is we wanted it really easy and short. The volunteer is actually looking at, the volunteer specialists are looking at trying to add some new modules. You know, these 4, but then also trying to add some others. And, you know, I know one of the things that they were looking at is trying to explain that the Thrive model that we talked about in our trainings the last couple of weeks, trying to add one about Thrive that would be simple for volunteers to understand. Now, I will say that with that, you know, these modules, gosh, they took 2.5 years to actually finally get them to this point. So, you know, it's really, don't expect anything quickly. So, and we have to find the money to do them. These modules ended up, and they are available. The other piece, we don't have the link right now, but they are also available in Spanish. So if we do need them in Spanish, I can figure out a way to get those available for us. So that was one of the pieces that we said was really important, that we had them available in English and Spanish. And so it ended up costing, oh gosh, it was probably close to $50,000 to do these 4 modules. So again, that's why I say we have to work on getting costs, you know, figuring out how else we're going to pay for them. We do sell them to the other states. I think there's about 10 other states that purchase them, and so that's how we recover some of our costs. But it can be fun. And then I know I've only got about 7 minutes, so I'm going to share with you. Is there any questions on the volunteer management piece? Again, it's really good. Actually, I'm going to share this. And the 4-H opportunities, I may hold off and share that, or, you know, do that in another time, because I would like to just quickly go over on the 4h.org website. I want to share with you, you know, show you some of the resources. So if you do not have, if you've not been to the 4h.org website, this is kind of your go-to place. You want to go under the 4-H professional page. This is probably the page I use almost continuously. There's information about how curriculum development, you know, oh, I have to log in. Okay, sorry. I'm gonna have to log in really quick. Okay, you do, if it's your first time going to this page, you do need to create an account and sign up. But again, okay, this is the one that I want to share with you is the professional and volunteer development. So this page includes information about youth development and then volunteer development. So this is the, oh, and it's not showing you this website. Okay. I'm going to share it so you get the website. Okay. So volunteer development. So on this, it talks about volunteer engagement and recruitment in this framework for 4-H volunteerism, the assessment, and then the rubric and syllabus. Here is the Everyone Ready, Everyone Ready material. So it is still available to download. There are some fact sheet series. So this ISOTURE model that I talked about, the volunteerism domain, the PRKC, the criteria for evaluating a volunteer program is on here, and then also some resources for you. The VRKC is on here. So again, here is your, if you've got the speaking skills, you've got a lesson plan and a PowerPoint for all of those. The other thing that's been offered, 2017, they offered a national e-forum. And so all of that, they have the recordings for all of those sessions. There were 3 different sessions that they offered for volunteers. And then as well as all of the handouts and the PowerPoints, etc. And I was looking to see, because they also did, I guess not. Okay. So those resources, and you could use those in your, in a meeting as well. So again, so this is this is a page that to me is really important for you to get familiar with and to understand. So any questions on that? I know in 2015 they did the Western Regional Leaders Forum as an e forum as well, and I don't remember where those sessions are located, but we can, I can always get those for you guys. As far as the 4-H opportunities, I do have a PowerPoint that I put together. What I can do is I will share, it's in the Nevada box. You can look at that. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and ask me those questions, but also, I will try to pull that in. Yes, Sarah, yeah. You have a question, Sarah?
Yes, with more like a comment.
Okay.
When you were talking earlier about the PRKC and the VRKC with the PowerPoints and the lesson plans, Carrie, I don't know who's all on because I can't see who's on, but
we have Elizabeth, Joshua, and Sharon.
Okay, so Carrie has a PowerPoint template, and Carrie and I I used it when we did the spring volunteer update. But you can import that into Nevada volunteer template, but please make sure you credit who the original authors are and that it came from the VRKC. And I would just echo what you said, Carrie. I use 4H.org and those professional development things all the time. That's where we pull a lot of our lead articles for Clover Clips from, because it has the research base and the educational base. So we use that continually here. I use it almost daily. So
me too. Me too. So definitely. Yeah, Sharon uses it weekly. So Joshua and Liz, if you're not familiar with it, you will. 4h.org. So yeah, again, I will share these with you. I'll share the other one with you because I've got 1029. So any other questions? Okay. If you have questions, feel free to reach out. So